You know, there's a peculiar thing about freedom. It tastes sweeter when it's been snatched away from you. I spent years locked away in the cold dungeons of that wretched kingdom, my spirit bounded by the iron chains and my dreams shackled to the dungeon walls. The walls echoed with cries of those who dared defy. But I was different. Each day fueled a fire within me, a fire that refuses to be extinguished. I carry the scars of my captivity etched into my very soul, a constant reminder of the malevolence that sought to crush the spirit of its people. On that fateful day when I was saved from captivity is the same day that the kingdom's grasp over its domain began to loosen. A revolution is brewing. But to help you understand, let me tell you how this kingdom came to be the way it was 5 years ago. This is Minecraft Hardcore 500 Days. Welcome everybody back to the channel for the finale of this hardcore series. In this episode I will be going over what I completed between days 300 and 500, and let me tell you, it was a lot. But first let's take a look back to our last meeting in this world. The overall goal of this entire series was 1, to not die obviously, and 2, make a great build in this world that would give it some notoriety. I have not used any video tutorials for any of these builds in this world, and I plan on keeping it that way. Giving yourself a goal in these long playthroughs after completing nearly every other main objective in Minecraft helps keep the game fresh. The last episode was dealing with that very aspect of the game. Most, if not all, of last episode was about laying the foundations of the largest build project I have ever undertaken, such as placing nearly 30,000 pieces of dirt to flatten the area, mining just about the same amount of deep slate to build the walls of the area, and then finally ending off the episode with a bang by once again defeating the Ender Dragon. The support on this series has been great, with many of you tuning in from all over the world. Also, I have not forgotten my promise from last episode of putting all of my new subscribers into my subscriber hall. So throughout this video I will be putting all of my new subscribers in my subscriber hall. So be on the lookout for your name throughout this video. I have so much planned with this episode, as you can see with the intro. This will be the final concluding arc in this part of the world. There will also be one more episode after this that will allow me to finish some final builds that I'm working on. That's right, this is not the last you will be seeing of this world. If you want some more information, go watch my 300-day world tour of this world to learn about the spin-off series I plan on doing. Without further ado, so I can get all 435 gigabytes of footage off my drive, let us begin right where I left off on day 301. I logged in where I left you guys nearly 1 year ago now. Recording all this footage plus college starting up in August really occupied my time recently. My first course of action to start this series was to add some of my new subscribers from last episode to my growing subscriber haul. So I want to give a big thanks and shout out to Oliver, Ray is Crazy, The If Stole an Entire Urinal, Mafia Panda, Hamu, What's Good My Gangy, Moonlight and Fifi, FRGTF, Quizitl? I don't know. Kixakai, Saman Stan Tan, Doug, J, Donut Crafter, OHP Beats, Overlick, Stephanie Jean, Shamelly Handy, Carter Skull, Bussa Bosom, and finally Gamergenics. If you were wondering where your name is right now, don't worry, you'll be added later in the video. For everyone else, thank you so much for the support, and be sure to stick around to see how you can make it into one of these videos sometime soon. I continued on by resituating myself with the base. While it had not been that long since I set the world down after 300 days, I still needed to get some things organized. However, this time I know what I needed to get done, and that was to begin work on the palace area of the build. So after gathering a couple of build materials, it was time to begin laying out the outline of what I wanted to build here. Taking a look at my masterpiece MS Paint blueprint gave me a rough idea of how I want to begin this project. So I began by working on the front entrance to the palace area. What I was going for was having some of these paths diverge at some point and reconnect at the end, then to go up some more stairs further up. I also wanted to incorporate some water elements inspired by a recent game I had played at the time called Plague Tale Requiem. On day 302, in order to complete this, I was in need of some more materials. This required me to go explore the nearby mountain biome for some coal to smelt. While the furnaces were working away, I began building small ponds to hold the water. After getting those done on day 302, during the morning of day 303, I began laying out more outlines of diorite to use as guidelines for my walls. While later in the episode I did not follow these entirely, it did give me a rough idea of what I wanted to get done. So on day 303, after fighting off the occasional zombie, I continued working on the past and then began building some of the pillars to give this area a second level. After accidentally falling into the now completely covered village a couple times, I got the pillars down and then began work on one of the many large towers of the build. These large towers would serve as intersections of walls inside the area, and also hold stairs to traverse the several floors of the build. So finally, at the end of day 303, after correctly counting the right size of the circle, I had gotten the first layer of tower done along with the most of the base of the floor. On day 304, I began laying the upper portions of the build. This involved laying dark oak logs across the pillars I had placed before. Then I began building the first layer of the entrance of the tower to end the day. It may seem like I'm going slow, but I'm not exactly following any type of tutorial here, so whatever I'm building, I'm making adjustments to, and sometimes that can take the entire day. On the evening of day 305, I finished the archway of the right entrance, and soon after the phantoms started attacking, I quickly headed to the blacksmith named after one of my subscribers, Pinguino, and slept for the night. For the next many days, I worked on the entrance area of the build, working on the front wall, adding the second entrance, and adding rooms around the first floor area. While this will be a common theme for the entire video, the size, detail, and scale of this build at the end will be truly something. And before I knew it, it was day 312 and the first entrance was complete. Here's a quick look through. After that, it was all about making more walls to expand the build. Remember that giant area I decided to carve out north of the castle? Well, we will be spending a lot of time over there. More specifically underground where the deep slate is. On day 313, the great deep slate excavation ensued. After getting the amount of deep slate I needed at the time, no thanks to some of the interrupting mobs, I returned to the build site to continue building some of the walls on day 317. I continued by placing some of the outer walls surrounding the entrance area. These walls will serve as walkways between each of the two towers. While building one, I had some early revolutionaries breaking down brand new doors I had just made. Continuing to ignore them, I kept placing the walls and walkways throughout the next several days. On day 316, I began work on one of the more interesting parts of the build. This area will hold a bridge that connects a lone tower about 50 blocks north. I don't know why I decided it to be a bridge that crosses nothing instead of a wall, but here it goes. After getting the bridge part done, it was now time to work on the tower. 5 days later, the tower and the walkway were complete. Using some of the leftover red flower bushes from making the stained glass, I lined the main walkway to the palace with them. To continue on day 321 and day 322, I used the massive amounts of stained clay I got last episode to cap off the towers with a spire-like roof, similar to the one near the house. I finished the one as the rain began to fall, shot a creeper that somehow got onto my roof, and then continued to complete the second tower until the morning of day 323. Later, I built an archway between the two towers which will serve as an entrance to the next area of the palace. After that, it was time to begin laying those foundations. Initially, I wanted this area to hold a massive map room, similar to what we have on one of the villager homes. But this will be changed later to something much better. So, we're just going to skip through this. In the meantime, before that edit becomes reality, on day 327 I continued building some of the walls around the north of the build. Also playing around with some of the accents to the wall so they'll have a little more depth to them. And once again skipping through some of the builds that I then later went back and changed. As I said, at this time I was strictly following the diagram I had made initially. But as I was listening to some of my favorite podcasts, the rusty, cobweb-infested, wrinkle-lacking brain of mine began to spin its gears once more to make this build even more impressive. Oh hey, it's day 330, it's time to build the foundations of the actual palace part. This building will hold the throne room along with several other important areas that will be built later. Lining the walls to be built with more deep slate, building the floors out of a variety of stones, and having to take quick pit stops to the mining quarry once more to gather more supplies. That was the name of the game until day 332. Also getting tired of some of the blocks not breaking instantly, I finally upgraded my pickaxe to efficiency 5 to help gather those materials. Headed back to the mine on day 335, it is time for another super fun deep slate mining extravaganza. Featuring my right index finger, crappy $10 mouse from Walmart, my struggling laptop which can barely record and play a game at the same time, and little zombies trying to eat my face. But quickly my finger began to hurt and my tools aren't looking too good either. So let's go ahead and head back. So to get my pickaxe back to a somewhat decent state, I flew around looking for surface coal deposits and gravel to sell to villagers. Soon after, it was time once again to start building on day 340. I began by building up some of the walls of the palace area and placing floors to some of the other towers, and finally finishing up those parts around day 342, with the building of the throne room and the stairs near the king's bedroom area. As I continue to build these walls, let's talk about today's sponsor on the video. What do you mean I don't have any sponsors yet? But my recent videos have kind of exploded. Shouldn't that make me famous now? Okay. Today's sponsor is the subscribe button. That's right. Who needs these large companies paying you money for your videos when you can sponsor yourself? I've been making these videos on and off for the past couple years as a side hobby, and I appreciate all the support you guys have given on not only my Minecraft videos, but also some of the other variety games I've posted on here. So be sure to hit that subscribe button to be placed in my subscriber haul in this world for all to see at the end of each episode. But that's about all I have here for now. Let's catch up back on day 347, where all I've done for the past 5 days is place deep slate tiles for walls around the palace. After I ran out of resources to keep going on the walls, it was once again back to building in the palace area. I don't know why I bounced back and forth so much on this build, but it sure makes writing this script much harder. I continued for several days by placing glass and stained clay in the windows and roofs of the towers, until I decided to start placing dirt on the south side. Yeah, I probably need to be diagnosed with like ADHD or something for how much I bounce around and never get anything completely done on this world. I ran out of clay and took a small trip to the Painted Desert to get some more on day 350. After that, I explored the surrounding terrain and found some very interesting terrain generation. Some of you might recognize this as Terralith biomes. That's right. This is one of the large changes I'm making to this world in order to spice some things up. Be sure to stay tuned to the channel and watch some more of my recent videos to learn about what I have planned for this world. Headed back home after I got enough clay and other resources for my build, I then headed down to the mine to collect a couple more stacks of deep slate to continue building on the palace. It was finally on the night of day 353 that I decided to take down my map room sphere that I had skipped over earlier in this video, and replace it with something more interesting. This new area that will replace it will be a sort of market meeting area intersection between the main areas of the build. So I started doing what I do best, building towers. This area will have a couple of different layers to it. Not only is it elevated from the ground level, there will also be some stairs and towers to give the area some depth. After building out one corner of the area, complete with a small tower, I began building a small bridge that would connect to another small lookout tower inside the area. After capping the tower with clay, it was time to move on once more to another tower. This next one is connected to the throne room area and will be the tallest and largest radius-wise of all the towers. And I finally ended day 359 by adding to the second half of the market area by building some more flooring. I still needed some more clay for the largest tower and some more stained glass before completing it. As I was preparing to build some more, it started raining, so I headed back to bed to begin day 360. I started this session by gathering a lot of cobblestone to place down as passed later, then I took a quick pit stop home to repair my very damaged tools from all the mining. I continued to work on day 360 and day 361 by adding to the market area by building on the upper area of the southern side. This area will also contain a small tunnel which will lead out to the barracks area of the build later. I continued on day 362 by making some alterations to some of the corners of the already existing walls by adding some more towers. This makes it seem more smooth than having 90-degree sections of walls coming together. I finished on day 363 by adding the upper area of the tunnel with an upside down stairs to truly give it that tunnel feel. Then began building the path out to the soon-to-be barracks and training areas. On day 364, I was once again of desperate need of more deep slate. And for the next several days, I brought my beacon down to the deep slate level and got mining, filling up several more shulkers before heading back on day 367. I used this newly mined deep slate to raise more walls around the throne room and its surrounding areas, and I slowly began placing the roof over the royal bedroom area. To continue on day 368, I placed more paths to the barracks area and built up some more of the low walls around the place. And to end that day, I finally placed the last roof on the tallest tower from earlier. Then I continued through the night putting more pathing to the outer walls. I bounced between that and building the walls of the roof of the throne area for the next several days. Then I began working on the garden, which will sit outside the royal area to serve as a sort of backyard. On day 375, I continued working on paths, stairs, and the walls. When it started to rain, I took a quick nap and got right back to it. But I realized I was out of deep slate once again, and headed back to the mines until my pickaxe was getting a little too damaged for my liking. Time for another epic gamer mining session. Okay, I get it. This isn't the most fun thing to watch, so let's just go ahead and skip it. After trading with some villagers to get my durability back up, I used the deep slate I got to continue building on the walls like usual. On day 380, I began building a roof over the throne room and its surrounding rooms. And after that, I was putting the finishing touches on the inside as well, including a dining area. After that was done, it was back once again adding the railing and accents to the surrounding walls. That was until I almost got struck by lightning and quickly prompted me to put on my chestplate. I've never been struck by lightning before, but I'm sure it hurts a lot, so let's hope my netherite armor isn't conductive. I spent the next several days bouncing back and forth from buildings, railings, paths, and once again placing dirt, which triggered my PTSD from last episode where I placed nearly 30,000 blocks of dirt. Then it was back to placing railings for a while, which is surprising that I didn't bounce back and forth to different things here. This continued until day 391 when I finally ran out of wood I had clearing out all those trees throughout the series. And for the next 100 days I will come to regret burning those trees as dark oak will slowly become more scarce since I'll have to wait on saplings. But after that it was time to begin building the alternative to the map room I destroyed earlier. This area will be on top of the hillside of the main walls and will serve as a sort of observatory for the kingdom. So after getting the circle laid out on day 393 and had a general idea of how I wanted to look in my head for later, I headed back to the village once again to repair my tools as they were all looking pretty rough. I then headed back to the painted desert to get some more clay for the towers, and using some of the clay I just got, I used it to finish up some of the last remaining towers on the build. After placing some more railings along the walls trying to come up with an idea for the tower that is connected to the royal bedroom, I began building the final tower. After being inspired by some designs I had seen recently, I wanted to use some amethyst blocks to give the roof a sort of spacey feel. Using some black stained concrete and black stained glass, I was able to make this roof of this build look sort of like a galaxy with some ambient lighting coming from it. And with that final project done I had planned for that session, my base was missing one thing that I had wanted for a long time. Candles. But in order to get candles I would need bees, so I took off to the skies in order to look for bees. And after enough flying, I was finally able to find some beehives. But guess who didn't know that you needed a silk touch? That's right, I had to fly all the way back to my base, which is about 4,000 blocks away. And I spent the rest of that day trading with villagers to get enough levels to finally get a silk touch pickaxe on an iron pickaxe. It was at this point I had finally crossed the 400-day mark. And at this point in the video, since I don't know how exactly long this video will end up being, we will take a quick intermission so you can get yourself a drink and some snacks. After getting the enchantments that I needed and spending the rest of the day setting up a lot of villager fletchers, I slept once more to change the day over to 401. Upon waking up in the blacksmith, I noticed that it had once again been struck by lightning in the most recent storm. There is just something with this building and burning down. This is the third time that I believe it has almost been completely destroyed. Luckily, the rain must have put it out before any more real damage could have occurred. So after that I flew my way back out to the bees and took some hives to bring back home. After getting the new beehive set up inside the village, it was once again time to go back to building on the project. I continued adding more railings to all the walls that needed it so far. Then after getting bored, I ran around to place light sources so our beautiful kingdom doesn't become overrun with mobs at night. Next I finished up adding accents to the tower of the main market area, and then moved on to building the stable area during the night of day 403. After getting some of the pins set up, I went around and found some horses to fill them with. Next, I spent some time building market stands around the market area I built right outside the main palace rooms. After that, I began building a smithing area next to the stables just to fill in some of that empty area in the build. During the day of 405, in the torrential downpour, it was time to begin adding some of the insides of the royal bedroom. I added the beginnings of the real bed, some carpet, and a couple more things to come since I ran out of the resources I needed. After that, I added a small path to the smithing area near the stables, and then headed to the other area south of the marketplace. This is where the barracks will be located, as I said earlier, and I will begin building with a small arena build. After that was quickly done, it was time to begin building another smithing area for this part of the barracks, this one being quite a bit larger than the other one in the stables. After getting sidetracked, I also built an archery range and then finished up on day 410 by completing the blacksmith. Next, I added some indoor decoration and then began work on the sleeping quarters for the quote-unquote mini soldiers to be housed in. Once again in the pouring rain, which seemed to be becoming more common, I built the quarters. After that, with the area mostly done, I headed back to the villagers to repair my tools. What I didn't show during that stretch of building was the numerous amount of trees I cut down to complete those buildings. As I said before, wood scarcity would become a sort of an issue for me since I'm using up all my wood before it could grow back with saplings. I messed around with some of the bees, gathering some honeycomb, and added some more beds to the village to increase our population a little more. Then I headed back to the forest to get as much wood as I could. During day 14 will mark the beginning of construction on the main village area of the project. This will be placed near the gates of our already existing village and will house our residents in the kingdom. But first we'll need to flatten some things out here to make room for some of the most, I guess you could say, unique houses to be placed here. I began by laying the foundations and then further adding the walls with dark oak. Then I got distracted and used up this small free space for stables for travelers to keep their horses at. Heading back to the build, I continued to put up the iconic stripped dark oak logs on the side of the build to give it some depth. Then I added more pathing around the house, which will eventually give it a more industrial middle of the town village feel. That way there won't be so much grass around these areas. Then I began placing the second house's foundations near the last one. These homes will be tightly packed together to really give it that medieval feel. And since I was being lazy, I didn't want to place the roof on either building yet, so I distracted myself with building slightly more path to the next area of the village and filling in this cave which has been here since day 1. And I ended the day on day 415 since the phantom started swooping in. At this point in the recording, I had taken a little bit of a break from the game for a while. During that time, my computer began starting a bad habit of completely dying on me. After investigating some of the issues, it turned out that some of my memory had gone bad. And some of you might think, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Memory does that sometimes, plus it's cheap to replace. Well, let me introduce to you my setup. Yep, that's the whole thing. And being the same as many laptops being made, customization is simply not possible. I found out after replacing some of the memory that I was able to actually replace, that the issue was the memory that was directly soldered on the motherboard. So now I have to go to school this next semester and make these videos with the hope that my memory doesn't crash my computer in the middle of an important task. Not completely trusting that my computer wouldn't corrupt the world in the event of a blue screen, I had backed up each and every time I played to make sure that I wouldn't lose any more than a couple of hours of progress just in case. But now with that fiasco over, after being paranoid of another crash, on day 416 I continued building with the hope that my progress wouldn't be erased. After that, I used my vast stores of birchwood to feed my Fletcher villagers for some quick emeralds. Soon after, into the evening, I built out the path to meet up with the dock around the coast. The next couple of days, I wanted to build a small wall to sort of section off the area between the village and dock. Unfortunately, when recording this, I began live streaming, so what came out was a little more than a slideshow. After I finally got bored of that, I headed back to the first two houses I had built and began putting up a roof over them on day 424. After finishing those up, I had just a little more space where I could fit another house, and began laying down the deep slate tiles around the perimeter to act as foundations. This house did not take nearly as long as the others, since I surprisingly did not get sidetracked during construction. In just one day, this house was complete, a new record. After flying around my base for a minute to get a scope of my next project, this happened. Yeah, thanks to the lightning rod I had so intelligently placed in the middle of the village, it started turning my villagers into witches. So I quickly got rid of it and headed back on my way to construction. However, the frequent storms in this world weren't done with me yet. Not only was it turning my villagers into witches, it tried burning down my brand new buildings. Soon after the storm realized it wasn't going to get much done to me, it headed out and allowed me to build peacefully. I began my next project, which will incorporate housing into parts of the wall I had built earlier. Not long after, I ran out of some of the blocks I needed, and it was time to head back to the quarry to mine up some more once again. Not long after, I was back on construction on day 430. I continued building up the walls slightly and sectioning off areas inside to serve as rooms. Then I began laying down flooring to make things look a little nicer. It ain't much, but I'm sure I can charge New York style rent for these small rooms. Just think about it. Beach access, in walking distance of the market, being able to touch both walls while standing in the middle of the room, dim areas that spawn mobs on your front porch every night. Who wouldn't want to live here? After getting all of our luxurious rooms cut out of the wall, I began laying a path around them to link back up with the main path in a sort of loop. Then I added some of the remaining logs I had to give it depth. To continue on day 433, I finished up placing those logs around and then began placing some railings similar to what I'm doing on the actual walls. On day 434 and day 435, I got some XP in a very humanely way by slicing up a couple of my chickens and then headed off to the Dark Oak Forest once again to gather Dark Oak for the next houses to be built. When I got back, I finished up some of the railing, then I began laying down deep slate tiles once again for the foundations of another couple homes. This area will be unique, however, as halfway through construction, I decided that these homes will be interconnected in a way to form a sort of large home. And there will also be a small area for a market outside of its door. Also, I later would build a small hill in this open area to serve as a place for another small tower to add to the city's skyline. I decided to start working on the hill for the tower first since I had tons and tons of dirt on hand already. I made a small pathway up the artificial hill as I built it, and on day 437, construction on the tower began. This tower was done in a very similar to the one near the lake. This tower will be very similar to the one near the lake. It won't be very large or technically very tall since it sits on top of a large hill. In just one day I was able to get the walls and windows carved out of the tower and began placing it on the roof shortly after. And just like that, when I don't get distracted, I can get things done pretty fast. After that, on the evening of day 438, it was time to start working on the houses that I had marked off earlier. I filled in the area surrounding the homes with all paths and began building the walls of some of the houses. After a quick sleep since I didn't want to mess with the phantoms and another quick stop to the storage room to pick up some more blocks, I realized I was out on deep slate once again. I headed back to the mine for another mining session this time, not being bothered by countless mobs. I had spent another hour of recording time mining nothing but deep slate. After a couple days off of playing, I logged back in on day 442. I concluded that I gathered enough deep slate since I did not want to sit and mine anymore, and headed my way back to the surface to begin working on the homes again. I got all the walls up, gathered some wood, and began placing the roof on the entire structure. And construction was finally complete, along with some inside details on day 447. Next up was the small market I had mentioned earlier. I built out a path to form the area for the stands to go. I placed the stands, filled in some of the roofs with wool, and now it was just a waiting game on sheep to produce the rest of the wool I would need. While I was waiting on that, I began laying the foundations for some of the final houses in this area on day 450. With it being day 450, we're in the final stretch. If you have been enjoying what you've been seeing so far, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Not only will you be notified next time I post, but it will also encourage me to make more content more often. As a broke college student looking for ways to pay for school, doing the things that I like to do, a subscription for some of these lengthy videos would make the world to me. And with that said, I will meet back up on the construction of the homes on day 451. This current house that I'm working on, that is a little longer than some of the others, came with some problems. First, I wanted to make a new way to get into this house instead of the old small stairs on the side to the door. In this house, I would make a new entrance area on the north side where residents could enter the home, then walk up some stairs to get to the main living area. The issue was how I was going to incorporate the roof into the lower design, but I settled on this type of design. And in not too long, I was putting the roof on and putting the finishing touches inside in day 451. To start day 452, I built some more foundations for more homes, and began trying to think about another building I could add instead of just homes. I settled on a monastery type of building that would have its own graveyard around it. Not only would it give it some variety to the landscape, it will also take up some room that I won't have to build on later. Yeah, it was at this point that building had become more of a somewhat chore. But with so much to do and not a whole lot of time left, I was for sure on a time crunch. This will lead to some poor design choices later near the palace. I flattened out the small area for a monastery and began laying the foundations for it. Instead of the lower parts of the build only being deep slate tiles and the upper part being dark oak, I decided to make the entire structure deep slate tiles. The roof, however, will stay dark oak. I placed some cobblestone walls around the outside to form the bounds for a graveyard, and then continued placing the walls for the building, leaving space for large stained glass windows. I then began placing another small tower near the back of the structure to serve as another small living area for residents. With the roof mostly complete, I put the finishing decorations, such as stairs for chairs and red stained glass to keep with the theme. Then I finally placed the roof to the small tower in the building and placed some lecterns inside for some more decoration. There was just one small piece of the area that had not been built yet in this section, and that was the area that sloped down to the sea hard. It was also covered in trees that I had yet to clear. So to make this area buildable, I wanted to make it flat. Kind of like those beams where you see a nice picture of nature somewhere, and then someone just put a Walmart Supercenter there. So I began by building some of the retaining walls to make it fit in a little more naturally, and then after that I would place some dirt to flatten everything out. Construction of this began on day 453, and it was basically finished the next day. But before beginning construction on the homes, I went around and placed new paths around the area to connect everything up. Then I placed more foundations on the newly built area. However, I had not built any more to these new houses besides the foundations of them. So on the evening of day 457, we will now enter a super epic montage of house building. I completed the houses in order when I placed their foundations, and I had a small tree farm growing in the monastery to keep some of my supplies up. After 2 straight hours of building, it was complete. I finished up some of the paths around the base of some of the homes and began sectioning off areas using hedges. To add some more decor, I added some graves and a path in the graveyard, and this area of the kingdom was finally complete on day 463. Next, we will move on to the dock area in this undeveloped area. Following the theme of sectioned off areas, I will do the same here. I began by placing a retaining wall to elevate the terrain I would build on for later. I got the initial wall built along with logs for support. Now I would need to build out the platform using the blocks I would use for paths. This area will also be another housing area with a small fountain and marketplace. On day 467, I got the area complete and got railings up along the walls. Then I placed the foundations of homes I would build on soon. Then I placed some more tiles and wood to serve as another market area. Then it was on the construction of the first house. I began working on the market area first as I waited for more trees to grow. I decorated the fountain area with candles and put colored wool to cover the market stalls. I headed back out to the forest to gather more wood and was met with a small family of zombies. And then I spent the rest of the day getting some wood. And while I'd love to show some more of the first person construction of the area, you know that RAM issue I talked about earlier? Yeah, it decided to happen during my recording. Luckily I didn't lose progress on the world, but it did corrupt the recording and audio to a point where it was not a great thing to watch. So enjoy the small time lapse and look around at the area. I had added some more homes and a marketplace in this area. Quite cozy if you ask me. But with the loss of those couple of days, we will meet back up to the recording while I began working on a small garden area next to the blacksmith. I dug out a small area for a pond and dug out an area for it to flow to the lake. I also added a small source of the stream coming from the wall that would be added onto later. I added some decorative boulders around and then added some more plants and such around to give it a more natural look. Next, it was finally time to work our way back up to the palace area of the build. Running short on time and out of ideas, I decided to make this whole area a large wheat field with a large lake for decoration. On day 481, construction would begin on the largest farm field in this world so far. I built out an area for the lake first that I would then make the farm around later. While this will look very rough for a while, I will be making adjustments to it as construction continues. After getting the bounds and walls of the lake area set up, it was time to start adding some of the farming plants. After adding more paths and lining the walkway with hedges, the construction of the wheat field has begun. Since the water from the river won't reach all the blocks, I was forced to hide water under the cobblestone slabs. At least functionally, this will allow people to walk on the slabs rather than the wheat itself. After playing the entire field on the first side, it was time to begin working on the other side. I now had to wait for the wheat to grow to get more seeds, so some of these farms will be bare for a while. I made a small storage area for hay bales just to give some more decor instead of everything being wheat. Kind of like Kansas. Day after day, water bucket after water bucket, construction was running along. After getting the fields done, it was now time to decide what I wanted to fill the other side of the walkway with. I settled on another version of the bridge from before and began building a tower to link to the main walls of the castle. This is where that building fatigue came into play, as I talked about earlier. Looking back at some of these new builds, I really don't like them as much. But when recording, I wanted to get as much done before the clock struck 500 days. I continued building this tower and hated it more and more as I built onto it. Next, I began building the beginnings of a bridge to the main walls of the castle. This will cross the observatory walkway, which I'll deal with later. I also forgot to mention that I had to erect another small area for the bridge to connect to. Then from there, I would add another part of the wall to connect it to the overall structure. After getting some of the main parts down, I then once again headed down to the quarry for the last time to get the rest of the deep slate that I needed. I do not wish the pain and boredom of this mining operation upon anyone, so I'll see you when it's over. I meet you back on day 493, where I just skipped some of the final parts of the build and I had finally built the rest of the section of the wall to connect to the main structure. In the field, I had farmed to get some more seeds to cover the rest of the open space. Now, to fill in more of this open space, I will also put another small farm under this new area I just built. After getting that area completely done, it was time to do something with the rest of this big open area. I was running out of time and had to quickly think of what I needed. Every good kingdom has to have a place for horses, right? And that is what first came to mind. But first I needed once again to place mindless amounts of dirt to make a good area to build at. And that is just what I did. For the next 2 days, I placed dirt to flatten out the area. On day 496, it was time to hurriedly construct a barn for the many animals to be stored at. Building all through the night, even while the phantoms were attacking, at this point I was on a major time crunch. This kingdom build was nearing its end, but I still had tons of space to do stuff with. That is why I want to enlist your guys' help for this next upcoming video on this world. I want you to give me ideas on what to place in these final areas. You can do this by commenting what you want, or join the Discord to give me some ideas by building it yourself and screenshotting it. The comment with the most likes will be the winner. These builds will be forever immortalized in the video on this channel, plus the upcoming world download if there is enough demand. This next short episode will be the last episode in the series before I head on to other projects in this very same world. So get down there and post your ideas. Coming back to the gameplay here, this barn was the last structure I'll have time to build, as while I'm placing this roof we are very nearing the final day of this episode. But before heading off this world for a while, I had some important business to attend to in the subscriber hall. All of the subscribers who were not placed at the beginning of the video will now be placed in order of subscription. So I want to give a big thank you and shout out to the following subscribers: Cody Williams, James Mock, Randomly Legend, Aquatic, Artem Curious, Just Miyako, Sai JC, I'm the Local Nerd, James Strand 123, Synthwave Sound, Burglar Plays, Bill Blakesley, Floral Lavender, Jay, Europig, Isif, Isaac Brigman, The Ghost Emo, Stephanie Jean, DSI, Ernestus Mazarima, Eric, Gamergenics, Vero Suarez, Gosner 3, SSJ5 Vitigo, Lily, Cerberus 402, Levi W26, Myosotis, Harper Albright, Captain Tampon, interesting, Necromancer King, the King of Vending Machines, this dude's name was so long I got 2 lines, Isabel Tunnel, Lamar, Megan Simpson, Oliver 677, Ray is Crazy 4363, Deado Thief, Artem Curious, I think I just got them twice, oh well, XY Dark 1, Mafia Panda, Humu, TG Guest, Duck, Jay, Kixaki, and Destin Diesel. Thank you to all these new subscribers on my channel. If you want to be on this board in the future, be sure to subscribe and comment to confirm that you subscribe. Well, since I was dumb and forgot to fix my recording back to full screen, I'll just have to stick with some shots I made earlier. But that is just about it for the main series on this channel. This series has been years in the making, mostly because I just do this as a side hobby, but it has been fun so far. So, to end us off once more, I headed to the new palace to soak in the sunset of the last 500th day.